Bueno, esto como vieron como en la televisión dicen que el tiempo es
This
tirano.
is like
Este programa de hoy
live
es así.
TV.
Tenemos ahora a un
Today,
panelista, a un amigo de
we
la
have a
escuela
tight
y
agenda.
tiene una
Now
agenda
we
muy
are going to
complicada
listen to a
también y nos ha
friend of the
dedicado algunos
school.
minutos, así que dígame cuándo le damos aire a Karim Lesina. Él
We have Karim
es
Lesina.
vicepresidente ejecutivo de Millicom
He's executive vice president of
y
Millicom,
está con nosotros un rato ahora en la mañana.
and he's
Después
going to
tenemos a
share
Ronnie
some
Taylor
time during the morning. This is Karim. He's going to talk about digital inclusion and the lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Ciao Karim, buongiorno.
Come va?
Come vai?
Tutto bene?
Tutto bene.
Good morning, Karim.
Perdón por la demora, pero hoy tenemos.
I'm sorry for the delay, but this is the last day of the school and there are a lot of activities. We have a tight agenda. I know that you have a tight agenda as well. So thank you so much for your time. And now I'm going to give you the floor, and I introduce you to all the fellows. We have 500 fellows. We have simultaneous translation, so we're going to listen to your presentation now.
La traducción simultánea va a tener que cubrir el ítalo-español.
Eso es un desafío.
Simultaneous translation is going to have to be in Italian and Spanish. You know, translators are Argentinian, and Argentinians understand a little bit of Italian, so don't worry. I'm going to apologize for my capacity of destroying the Spanish language. We always say that we have to keep going. So Olga asked me to talk about a very important topic. For the telecommunication system, and when we talk about internet, we think about an ecosystem, and we have a trend to forget about the basics. And I think that is not a secret, but one of the secondary effects of the COVID-19 and the pandemic for our society and our way of living was the need for connectivity. In the last 2 years, we have seen businesses go into bankruptcy, business changing and shifting, and the paramount role of telecommunication was clear. Now we are having a conversation. I'm in Miami, you are in Buenos Aires, and we have people from all over the region. And nevertheless, in our everyday life, it's like our everyday life was exposed. Everybody uses the mobile phone for internet, and they want to have access everywhere in the world, no matter if they are in the middle of the desert. So we are not Google or Facebook that when you think about internet, you think about that. But in my opinion, we are responsible for assuring connectivity, and I think that that is the most important point that I want to talk about this morning. Not everybody knows about the Millicom group. We have presence in 9 countries, not in Argentina, unfortunately, but in Central America, Paraguay, Bolivia, and our commitment is to develop this digital world that for us is paramount for connecting people and connecting communities in all the countries, and that is the most important focus of our company. What we have seen is that during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a huge difference between people living in the cities and people living in the rural areas. Not only the way of traveling, but in the last 2 years, everything was a little bit more complicated, more complex. We have seen that there was a huge demand for connectivity. When everybody was 24 hours connected, we could see that the network capacity was able to handle that. there was an increase and an expansion of the network for all operators in all countries, and this is something that we should be proud of. This was a very well teamwork that was done, and people needed that to work, so they needed connectivity, and we needed to comply with that commitment during the pandemic. We had teams on the streets making sure that the networks were working and even supporting this kind of increase in connectivity. It's been 2 years, almost 2 years, very difficult years, but most people couldn't imagine how long the pandemic was going to take. And that is important when we analyze and when we started working as regards future investment and how we are going to allow people to grow and to connect. But we need to talk about the digital gap that has a lot of reasons. One of the main ones is the lack of coverage, specifically in rural areas. There's a low adoption of digital networks in the rural areas, and that is a problem in Latin America as regards connectivity, digitalization. But I am optimistic. I have a positive view about this because I think that Latin America has a lot to do, or a lot can be done, because we have a young and motivated labor force, and we see that everywhere. And there's also a growing use of English in Central America, and that can enhance our possibilities in this interconnected and globalized world, because internet allows us to get more content, but by being interconnected globally, we can do a lot, and that is very important. Something that we need to remember when we analyze this is the difference between the telecommunication sector and sectors such as transportation, utilities, energy. The difference is that 75% of our sector is financed with private investment. That is all over the region, not only in a single market. And that is paramount, because private investment means looking for money in the international market and being able to offer those investors that decide to invest in our region and show them the region, and they need to have a positive attitude towards the region. If I analyze the IDB numbers, they say that we are going to need like $18.7 million in order to bridge the digital gap as regards mobile phones. We are talking about a lot of money here, and 75% of maybe a little bit more is going to be paid by the private sector. So there should be some business basis in order to convince those investors. And we need to take into account that when we talk about the future of the sector, because one thing is to foster digitalization and connectivity, and also working with governments in order to foster investment in the sector, with the idea of taking advantage of the benefits to recover our economies in the future. I am Italian, but I say our economies because I have been working in the region for many years, and we need to think that our region should be integrated, and we need to work together with the public and private sector to continue moving forward in this development. We cannot underestimate the importance of public policies in this sense, specifically when we talk about the price of the spectrum, when we talk about internet governance, sometimes we don't think about this, but the cost of the spectrum is going to be an important way to allow closing this digital gap. When countries ask high cost to give a spectrum to the operators, we can see that a lot of money that could be used to developing networks in the rural areas is lost in this cost that they are required to pay. And many countries are asking operators to cover more rural areas and to invest in these kind of areas. And this is something that we need to pay attention to, close attention to. And we need to think about the spectrum not only as a way of connecting mobile phones, but actually the spectrum is a precondition to allow people to have internet in cities and especially in rural areas where it's more difficult sometimes to do all the deployment of the networks. So that is an important point. This is one of the things that we have been seeing during the pandemic, that governments and public operators work together as a team. That was great during the pandemic. That was a positive thing. Working together to identify opportunities, such as in Panama, where the Panamanian government offered the spectrum in order to have more capacity. And that is a vital way of looking into our region. The most important aspect of the spectrum is infrastructure. In the spectrum, we need towers, infrastructures to cover the countries and to get authorization to build new infrastructure. Sometimes it's difficult in some countries, and we need to remember that if we don't have the infrastructure, we are not going to have a network. The network needs those towers everywhere, and they are always going to need more and more, because without the antennas, we have no coverage. And this is vital. The cost of the spectrum is vital as well. To have the infrastructure is important. And another important aspect that we have noticed in this last year and a half is that the regulations that we have today were drafted in the 90s. All the regulatory frameworks were developed following the theory of the 90s, and the world is different today. The players are different, so we need to start paying attention in changing these regulations. We need to look for an updated model that is going to adapt to this incredible evolution of internet. We can have sandbox regulatory models, such as in Colombia, that is very interesting. We can also have like the American models, where they have opened an opportunity to develop new companies. And this is something that we need to pay close attention to. Sometimes regulations are essential for development, but sometimes regulations can block innovation, and that's why we need to focus on that, especially in some countries more than others. And we need to focus on that in our region. Latin America has a possibility of closing this digital gap and also jumping towards economic recovery by attracting and convincing future investors and future developers of new technologies, new apps, to do it in our region and not to go into the US or to Europe. The regulatory framework is very important in that sense. When we analyze it, we can see that it's a very important aspect. And I'm going to finish in a couple of minutes. I want to insist on something else. Another area in which we have started focusing in the last few months is the fintech environment. Even with the increasing trend in the last couple of years, the pandemic accelerated this sector. The closing of banks and companies made people go online to online banking. In our region, cash continues to be the main method of payment for transactions. Tilo developed a Tilo Money that offers operations with online banking. Why am I insisting on this? Because in order to allow the rural areas to become digital, it's important to also offer them the services. In the cities, everybody has access to apps and everything, but it's also very important to develop products or services at the local level so that people have an incentive to use them, because it's not only about having access to internet. They need to also understand why they want to use those methods of payment. For example, we need to think about that. Sometimes some people tell me, we all need internet, we cannot live with our phone, but we need to understand that many people in our region use SMS, voice services, and not so much internet. So we need to continue fostering or giving incentives so that people can use the capacities offered by internet for developing services at the local level. And sometimes some people tell me about 5G and implementing 5G in the next couple of years. But I think that what is more important is to try to offer coverage in countries with 4G and then allow people to move from 3G that they use today to 4G. When we have that done, we can start focusing on 5G. We need to remember that in the cities, sometimes it's not the same case as in the rural areas, and to close the digital gap is more important in our countries in order to be able to grow and to develop. I don't know how to tell it in Spanish, in a more like universal or horizontal way. We need to know that there's a difference between the cities and the rural areas, and digital and financial inclusion is important, and these are paramount elements for developing our countries. And I'm going to wrap up here. I hope that I gave you an idea of why, when we talk about internet and we think about the most attractive issues in internet, such as Instagram, Google, etc., we need to remember that without networks, we don't have access to those services, and that the networks are not something that you are going to do once and that's it. It's a constant investment that operators and the socio-economic system needs to make. And in order to allow our countries to continue growing, We need to think about this and think about why there are no enough investment and why we need to work together with the public and private sector in order to build the future regulations that are going to help our regions in Latin America, to allow communities, younger communities, to be part of this globalized world that is a very nice world, especially when you are based in Miami, such as myself. But sometimes we need to imagine that there shouldn't be different models. I hope I was clear with my presentation. I'm sorry for destroying the Spanish language, but it's better to try to do it in Spanish and not speaking in Italian, French, or English in my case. I want to congratulate you on something, Olga. 13 years of this school. This is incredible. I want to thank you and all the team because what you do is fantastic. We don't talk a lot about our sector, and sometimes people don't know how complex it is. And they may think that interconnection and everything is like an easy thing, but we need to talk about it. We need to work together to develop the regulations that will allow us to grow. It's not something random. We need to work together as an ecosystem. And to people that is in charge of internet, such as ICANN, people that is in allowing us to have the services and creating value. The best thing is working together for the benefit of the ecosystem and our society. Thank you so much for your words. That is the spirit of this school, to work in a multitasking form of way, and all these topics that you talked about can be solved if we work together with engineers, economists, sociologists, politicians. We need to work together. That is the spirit and the idea of this school and what we have been trying to do all over these years. That fellows have more questions at the end than at the beginning, but this is the good thing. You remind me of my time working with mobile networks implementation in Argentina a lot of years ago, and the importance of being connected nowadays. There's a lot of people with no access to internet, or that is very expensive, and this idea of fintech and connectivity, and including in the financial system, the informal sector of Latin America is really important. Half the economic sector in Latin America is informal, and I think that would improve regional economics. There are several unicorns in Latin America, some from Argentina, that are trying to include, through these new fintech models, people that is outside the economic system. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you have a tight agenda today. I'm sorry for the delay. Greetings from Oscar and Adrian. The good thing is that I can go from talking to you, now I'm going to talk to a bank. That is the nice thing of the virtual context. This wasn't allowed before. So now I'm going to move from Buenos Aires to New York in a couple of seconds. Bye. Have a nice weekend. Thank you so much for being part of this school.